Hello and welcome to Garageaholics E30 M3 restoration build. My name is Frank Macaluso, and today we're going to be doing body work on two very important, very popular panels: the front lower windshield cowling and the rear tail panel. Now, this is not M3 specific stuff, guys. This is all E30. Anything you want to do regarding body panel replacement, this is the video to watch. Now, this is the front cowling. Now, this is actually very prone to rusting out over time and needs to be replaced. Not just replacing pieces of it, but replacing the entire panel. Part number is down in the description. This here is the rear tail panel. Now, this guy, not necessarily susceptible to rust per se, but where the rear end gets hit by any reason whatsoever, replacing this panel is almost mandatory. So I'm going to show you how to replace both of these panels. Ready?
She's right in the background. Is that okay? There's like boobs over your left shoulder.
All right, so let's go over there. All right. Now that we got a different view, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do. Because we have two panels, and we're going to split it up into two videos. And the first video is going to be just removal of the panel. And exactly what you need to know, what spot welds you need to drill out, what you need to cut out with either a Dremel or a cutoff tool in order to remove those panels. And then in the second video coming up later in the week, we're going to end up reinstalling those panels, aligning them properly, and then putting spot welds where we need to make sure that all of the panels are in complete alignment. So guys, stay with me. Guys, I think it's going to be an interesting episode. I think you're going to learn a lot. I haven't seen anything like this on YouTube before because I was trying to learn by watching YouTube videos and I couldn't find anything that had anything specific to that. So here I am telling you exactly how to do it. So stick around, guys. We got a really great video for you coming up today. First, let's take a look at the front panel. Now, I took off the windshield, and we do need to take off some more gasketing material here, but the windshield gasket includes this line here, which looks like it's some sort of a copper brazing interface between the A-pillar and the windshield gasket. And there are spot welds that we're going to need to reveal here and here, and all along here where it's connecting to the firewall. And the same thing on both sides. This is basically symmetrical down the center line of the car. So once we start taking care of a lot of the items here, the other side is going to be basically copy and paste and do the same thing. So let's take a look at the new panel and see how it would look to fit. So here is the new panel right here, side by side with the old panel. Now, there's two things we're going to need to do before we install the new panel. The first thing is, of course, make sure that the VIN number is stamped here because this is a blank canvas. We need to put the VIN number in there. And the second thing we need to do is when we remove this panel, we need to make sure that this interface here, in particular on both sides, accompanies this lip. And this lip here is what gives it that smooth transition. So what we need to do is, once we cut this out, I'm going to cut it out right before this lip. And I think what we need to do is heat this area up, and then the piece that's remaining that I cut out will just fall out because I think that's like a copper braze. So as long as we heat it up with an acetylene torch, I think that piece will drop out, and then this part will remain untouched or unscathed to allow this to fit in. Now, if that doesn't work, we'll just have to do a butt joint and then weld it up, and then we'll just do the metal work to smooth it over. So there's always a backup plan here. But for now, what we need to do is basically wire brush all this. We need to remove this gasket, and we need to expose all of the spot welds. All right, we've got all of our spot welds exposed. And you can see as we wire brushed all of this away, we have basically bronze exposed here where that overlapping joint was on this quite complex joint here, but we're going to try to work through that one by one. We're just going to use a cutoff wheel to cut it off all on the inside of all this. But when we reinstall this new piece, you're going to notice that there are two different types of spot welds that we're going to end up needing to do modifications on. The type that we just weld onto this piece right here, and then the type that we're going to end up having to drill through this piece first and then install it. So what I mean is, if you look at this piece, all of these spot welds all up here are all bonding these two pieces of metal together, and the metal's on the back side here. And what that means is that when I drill these out, I need to weld these back in on the new panel, and since there's no holes here to weld through to the base metal, I'm going to need to drill a whole bunch of all of these holes along this side so that when I reinstall this panel, I can just weld along those holes. So I'm going to need to drill holes here. As opposed to on this side over here, you see that there are spot welds along this edge. Now this is the outside edge. This inside edge here is this panel. So when I put this panel in, I'm going to already have drilled out the holes on the body side, and all I need to do is just weld up. So I don't need to drill any holes on this here because they've already been drilled on the other side that I've previously drilled out the old spot welds. So what we need to do now is just kind of start drilling away at all of the spot welds and just take it one by one. And to drill out the spot welds, I'm using a spot weld driller, which includes a 3/32 bit, which you drill your pilot hole. If you don't want to drill a pilot hole all the way through the part, what you can do is you can use a punch to punch a set hole, which is basically a little divot that allows this little spring-loaded pin to sit in so it drives this to the center. It's kind of like a little mini hole saw. And then this guy basically just drills out the outside of the weld so that the part can be removed. And then you can always grind down the excess metal later. Alright, so now to drill a spot weld, you're going to need a 3/32 bit, and you're going to need another drill, or you can just swap them back and forth. But here I got a spot weld driller here. And this has a push pin with a spot weld, actually like a hole saw. So what we're going to do is, we're going to start locating all of these guys and start drilling through. Let's do this one for example. And once you drill the hole through, now the spot weld is going to come through much easier because this centering jig is going to go right through the hole, and all you need to do is just drill through. But you don't want to go through the second layer of metal, because if you do that, then it's going to be harder because of this side that you're dealing with. You're not going to be able to make your hole, and it's going to make this side weaker. So what you want to do is just make sure that you drill just enough to get that to pop through, but not go through the other metal. And now you got to do all of these other guys and all of these down here, and then we got to start cutting these out. We'll cut these out last, but we will drill out all the spot welds. Now that all the spot welds are drilled out, we can't really pull anything out yet because we still have this whole chunk here that's still connected to the car. Now the plan for this here is to cut all of the brazed areas that I see, and I want to cut on the inside so that I can experiment with it from behind after I take this whole panel off and really fine tune where I want to cut and test fit the new piece. In this case, this is not necessarily a game of finesse. This is more of a game of cut and pry. So I'm going to use a Dremel tool. I'm going to cut up here, here. I'm going to start cutting in here nice and easy. And then I'm going to end up using the larger cutoff tool to take care of the back. Okay, so I got both corners, again, cut on the inside, so now I can fiddle with it after I get this piece out. Before I can even fit the new one in, I want to get this guy out and see how it looks. Still. There we go. It's out. So yeah, look at the rust under there, huh? Look at this. Look at all that rust. That was just, ooh, actually, wow. I'll be damned. Ziad, you were right. I kind of fought you on replacing this panel, but you had a hunch, and the fact that this was kind of bowed in on the VIN numbers, you had a problem with that, and I said, let's just leave it, but you said no. And looking at this, it appears that most of the rust is due to a rework from behind of this panel, where it looks like a custom piece was added on. Now, to fine tune the front so that we can get the new piece to fit, we have to do three things. First, we need to do this edge here and make sure that this edge is cut right along that brass line. You can see the brass line comes up and over and back up. This part here, right, this little piece here needs to be cut off. We gotta do that on both sides. Second is we need to grind down all of this exposed metal and make it nice and smooth and ready for that new panel to be installed. And then third, we need to hammer back and straighten it all out, including the most weighty part, which is this. I know it looks bad now, but I'm telling you, the new panel, when it fits on there, it'll define exactly where these need to weld. Remember, metal can move, it has memory, and it can move and be banged back and forth anywhere you want it to go. It just takes time. Okay, I think I'm basically there. As you can see here, I allowed for an underside gap in between here, and that allows for the whole bottom piece to slide in. You can see here how there's a lip on the outside, and that lip basically goes underneath and slips underneath all of that. But over here is all flat, and that flatness is to accommodate for this piece right here. So that's gonna slide right down in there as if it's a guide. Once that's in, the whole thing just kind of slips in. And this is, obviously we can move this around. But once I do that to the other side, I think I'm gonna be able to slip this in pretty easily, I'm thinking. So let me attack the other side as well and start taking some measurements before I do my test fit. So the front cowling has been test fit a couple times. It really was very easy to get it in. And you'll see that the rear tail panel is actually a little bit more complex, but we were able to fit it in with a couple of minor adjustments, but everything seems to line up really, really well. Remember, before we lay any welding down, we need to first stamp the VIN number right in that little area there that you all are very familiar with on the E30. So we got to stamp that VIN, then we can start welding it, but that won't be until the next episode. Until then, let's start working on the tail panel. I got a good buddy, my friend Dan, who's actually been helping me with this, and you'll get to meet him, and we can work together on this as we move forward. Now let's talk about the rear panel. Here I have my buddy Dan that's going to help out because he's got some really good technical knowledge about metalwork that's really helping me understand how to pull this panel out most effectively without doing something that puts me in a point of no return. Now let's talk a little bit about the panel and what needs to be cut. There are going to be spot welds, and those spot welds are going to be on the inside of here, so we need to grind away at some of the metal in order to expose that. So together we're going to end up doing cutting, and we're going to do some spot weld drilling, and yeah, we'll see how we do this.
Here for the jack. Also runs down the inside of this part.
And as you can see here, this piece actually kind of curves around and goes underneath. So this right here is actually part of the fender that we want to keep. So this is going to curve around and it kind of comes around. So there's a couple of spot welds probably in here. And then of course, right along backside here. So we're going to kind of cut all this off for now right here. And then we can fine tune all this with the wire brush and figure out exactly where we need to cut there. Because as you can see, That's what it looks like right now. So we have to make sure that we conform to that. Very important that we don't cut what we shouldn't cut, or else we're gonna have to add metal later. So now we've got these two pieces cut, and it's kind of flopping around in there now. So that's good. And we actually can, if we want to make it easier on ourselves, to cut this piece off right here and then give us the access to the inside. I had already started removing a lot of the seam sealer and exposing those spot welds. So now what we need to do, Dan, is we need to drill out the spot welds, and hopefully that'll allow us to kind of pull back a little bit more. We'll also end up cutting this as well. So we'll basically be peeling this whole panel back and down to give us the access that we need. So now most of the spot welds have been drilled out. You can see from around here, we drilled from the back side in, and then that exposes all of the holes that we were able to just easily use a spot weld driller and get through this side. And over here, as you can see, we cut up here, but we also cut down here and went all the way down to the line. Again, we've left margin by cutting on the inside here. There are 3 spot welds right under here that you can see that we've gotten out right there. And we're conveniently removing, by removing the panel, we're also getting rid of this rust spot, which is kind of cool. And down in here, you can see those spot welds, and you can see where we cut. And we grinded down a lot of the seam sealer, but there's a lot of seam sealer in that corner there that we need to get rid of in order to make sure that there's nothing as well that kind of creeps up this little area here. I don't know if there's any spot welds in here, but we're gonna end up finding that out, because that's probably gonna end up being the last thing that we take out before we pull the whole panel out. Okay, so in focusing on the passenger side, we were able to get a lot done. Dan was able to find additional spot welds that were down below there. And you can see where all of these spot welds actually resided. And yeah, it was pretty bad. So there's a couple sections we were trying to figure out whether or not it belongs to the body or whether it belongs to the tail panel. But I think we got this whole piece, basically, or at least the side of this piece, completely disassembled and separated. And now it's just a matter of separating it along the center edge, and we got to do the other side too. So I'm just going to do the other side. And then what we need to do is basically take this whole tail panel piece and fold it down, because I don't believe that there are spot welds on the underside of this wheel well like there are on the top. I think that the spot welds are only on the top, and then on the bottom side is that's where all of the seam sealer is. That's kind of holding it in. And don't underestimate the strength of the seam sealer to hold all this in. I mean, it's pretty strong stuff. So yeah, good job, Dan. Let's keep on going with it and see if we can get this tail panel off.
Yeah, that seems to want to come away.
Separating the two halves there by after we drill out those spot welds. It's too light. So we're lounging. And here's the deal. We got the panel off. We see that there is a lot of damage down below. That's what made this section a little bit harder to remove, because there was welding that was done to this panel after the fact that we didn't see in direct spot weld identification. So now what we need to do is basically fix all this, remove all the seam sealer, grind it all down. We need to get rid of these corner pieces to make the edges more seamless and flush, and then install and start welding. Okay, so first what I did here was basically trim out all of the excess metal that allows this new piece to just kind of slip right in. So that's all looking good back there. You can see that I drilled out a number of those spot welds. There's one over there, 2. So these guys are literally going to just kind of slip in. I'm gonna weld up the spot welds, and then obviously put more seam sealer on before we start painting. And this line has now been completely cut all along the bottom here. I still need to rework this, but that's been completely cut. Now let's take a look at the seam on the other side on the actual panel to see how that lines up. You can see here that the seam actually has a fold that goes inside, which is great because that's going to be a perfect opportunity for us to weld the actual panel to the body. So what we need to do is literally clean on the inside of this edge here, and that cleaning allows us to get a really good bead of weld right on the outside without burning through the existing seam sealer. So now we're starting to work on fixing this guy and pulling this out. And as you can see, we've done a little bit of work to pull this out because it was pushed in from an accident. So the idea here is that this frame rail got crimped in and we need to uncrimp it, uncrinkle it, and pull it out at the same time. Now there's not a lot of momentum that I have on this car, so I need to pull back without actually pulling the car off the lift. And the technique that Dan told me, by the way, awesome job, Dan, thank you so much for the clue on how to do that. You can see that there are crinkle marks here on either side from the accident. And by using a pry bar with metal lined on each side, you can use the pry bar to actually uncrinkle it from inside. And by doing that and doing it in an iterative process back and forth, it actually works its way back to its original position, which is really cool. And you can see here that I've already done that. I can even fit my finger in here already. So I want to pull it back maybe another ½ inch just to make sure that I've fully got it seated in the right factory location. So a little bit of hammer and dolly work, a little bit of pry bar work, we're going to have this thing back to the existing location. Just about done with this side. I mean, take a look at how nice this turned out. This is a little bit crinkled. We're gonna end up putting a lot of seam sealer all along inside of here, so you won't even see that. But I was able to get this fold a little bit more straight, and that's important because there was a little bit of crinkling involved here, but now that that's nice and flat, I think we're in good shape. The actual piece here is very straight, and it's been pushed out about 3/4 of an inch at this point. You can see the factory one that's not modified at all and how straight that one is. I straightened it out a little bit, but it really didn't require any body work. And of course, this guy right here has been completely straightened out with the hammer and the backing tool. And that really is important to get that nice and straight and clean. So while this was also cleaned, as you can see here, I cleaned up this whole surface because we're gonna end up welding all of these little spots here. And of course, here is going to be just one big bead that's going to go right down the middle. This whole side here, including this, is ready for installation. But we do need to remove this. And that guy, I've outlined exactly where I need to cut and drill out the spot welds. You can see in here, I've outlined where the spot welds are here. So you guys know there's one all the way over here in the backside. But those spot welds need to be drilled out, and then you need to cut along this yellow line, and then you'll have a template, something similar to this. And there it is, spot welds drilled, part cut out. Now we need to basically deburr everything, clean it all up, and cut all the way down into there. So now that all the preparations have been done on this side, down below here, up and around, this has been all straightened out, this guy and this guy. The basic preparations have been completed for allowing this thing to, test fit. But unfortunately for you, we have to end here. And in the next episode, we'll do strictly reconstruction of both of these panels. We'll weld them in, we'll finalize and tune to make sure that everything looks exactly the way that it should. We'll seam seal it as well and get this thing looking back to its OEM status. My name is Frank Macaluso, guys. Thank you so much for watching this new updated revision of the E30 M3 restoration. Just take it easy. Later.